notoriety, the tradition, and what this race means. And I think given that little extra incentive, some drivers take advantage of it, some don't. And one guy that hasn't taken advantage of it so far, at least in my opinion, is Joseph Newgarden. That's why I do not have him near the top of my list, and I only have him at 5 right now.
And Matthew, you would know better than I do, but for some reason in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that he was on the podium at some point at some race here in Indianapolis. Am I wrong about that?
He finished 3rd in the 2016 race, but
okay.
A poor pit stop late on the fuel. He was not as aggressive down the pit lane and on his in lap as Munoz. So even if Alexander Rossi had run out of gas, Newgarden still would have won that race. It would have been Carlos Munoz who would have won that race. So that late gaffe there by Newgarden still hangs in my mind as to, can this guy get the job done if he's in position to win the race down the road?
Let's just hang on him for just a moment. He wins the Grand Prix or he wins the Indianapolis 500. Either one of those two are huge, huge wins. For anybody to win in Indianapolis is a huge win. But how does that elevate his status, if you will, in the way that we look at him as a driver if he wins one or both of those races, or even gets on the podium of one or both of those races?
Indy Car Grand Prix, I still don't think it's at the level of the Indy 500. It's if you win the Indy 500, because that would put him right at the same level of a Will Power. It would put him right at the same level of Elio Castroneves, and I'd say it would put him just behind a legend in Scott Dixon, who has multiple championships. Now, granted, Joseph only has one title, but unlike Dixon, who has come short on many opportunities, he has a chance to equal him as far as victories in Indianapolis. That puts him right on the same level as far as the Indy legends. So, and of course, look at all the drivers who have won the race with Penske. He's another Penske driver that's won the race. It shows not only that he's a good driver, but it shows that, once again, Roger Penske is the ultimate guy in determining talent and who are the best drivers or the drivers suited to win the Indy 500.
You gotta love or hate, if you will, love or hate Team Penske. I think a lot of people equate Penske to the New England Patriots. They're a dynasty, and they've been able to manage to take drivers and turn them into some of the best drivers in the world, and we've seen that time and time and time again. And so for him to be at Team Penske, that does not happen by circumstance. That does not happen by accident. So we'll see what happens with Joseph Newgarden. But I tell you what, the guy, a couple of people that I'm liking seeing on the rise, if you will, this year. And let's talk a little bit about Colton Herta. We talked about him preseason. We talked about a little bit about how that came together. But Colton Herta, he's like, what, rookie? Me? Who? He's really showing me a lot of grit and heart and soul, which a lot of times that's really all you need to be a very good driver. Go ahead.
Remember at the start of the year when I had Gritology, I had him all the way down at 30. He's now at 16. Right. So what does that say about what he has proven? And again, that this is essentially an Andretti Autosport car. So the same kind of stuff that guys like Hunter Ray, Marco, Rossi have. Colton's essentially got the same thing, and he's taken it to the max. Now, granted, I'd say the dysfunction at the start of the year with, 2-car, 1-car, whatever it's going to be, that kind of hurt them in the start of the situation, but they have picked their pieces together. They had a solid performance to win Austin. They made a little bit of a gaffe at Long Beach, but they were in contention there. If not for that, I'd say the Indy Car Grand Prix, they'll be in contention, and this depends on how they qualify. Colton Herta could be right up there. Like I said, a couple of weeks ago, he certainly has an outside chance to possibly get the car in the top 9. Of course, I think the depth of the field will prevent that, but I think it could be very close. And if Colton Herta gets there, unlike some other people in the stands, I will not be surprised if he gets in the top 9.
Me either. Absolutely. And I'm really proud of this kid. I want to see what happens with him. I'm becoming a fan of Colton Herta, that's for sure. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned Ryan Hunter-Reay. Certainly Ryan Hunter-Reay's on the rise himself. No stranger to Indianapolis, and we know him well here, and certainly he has performed well in Indianapolis, and Indianapolis is certainly one of his favorite places to be. Ryan Hunter-Reay going into Indianapolis.
The question with Hunter Ray is simple. Is the new Dallara body kit going to allow for passing? Because unlike his teammates, granted he has a compare front row qualifications, he is not the strong qualifier that, say, a Rossi is or a Marco is at Indy. So I'd say right now, of the big names on that Andretti list, I don't like Hunter Ray's chances. Now, he'll qualify well, but I just don't think he will get to, the top 9 based on the depth of this field and the multiple teams that can get there. And then obviously, then the question is, well, is the car going to be able to, are you going to be able to pass with this car? If you can, Hunter Ray has shown the ability to come from the back of the pack to the front here many times before at Indy, and certainly has to be considered a threat. But if it's like last year where it's tough to overtake, he may have to qualify better than normal to be a contender again.
Talking with Matthew Embury, WSBT up in South Bend, our official Indy Car contributor. Certainly our Homer show here in Indianapolis. We are located here in the west suburbs of Indianapolis. Let's talk a little bit about the defending champion of the Indianapolis 500, and that's Will Power. I mean, we like to talk about that sophomore slump, but not really, because he's not really a sophomore. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know why a lot of times we get caught up on these expectations that defending champion. Well, maybe defending champion is what we're talking about, but at the same time, you would say defending, this is what's mine. This is what I'm entitled to. So like my house. I live in my house. I have my family. I have my dog. That's what I'm entitled to, and that's what I should defend. Titled to another championship at the Indianapolis 500, but we call him the defending champion because he was the prior winner of last year. But in my mind, each year, each driver has to go out there and respect that track at 16th and Georgetown at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to do well. So Will Power, defending champion of the Indianapolis 500, how does he defend it? Does he keep it? I don't know.
Well, one thing I do know, based on what I saw Wednesday, is it seems like there's a massive weight off his shoulders. He was able to put the car wherever he wanted, and it seemed to stick. And it seemed like he had the more confidence to drive it in there as opposed to anyone else besides Sato during that open test, based on what I saw on the camera and then looking back at the replays on YouTube. I think just there's a weight and there is now a confidence there that was not there when he was a non-winner of this event. I think that's made a big difference looking ahead to the month of May, and I think he will be certainly a contender and a very strong contender, possibly be our first back-to-back winner since Elio Castroneves in 2001 and 2002. That's why I have him at the top of my Griditology list as the provisional pole sitter. I think he is by far the strongest qualifier, and like I said, he has transferred the domination as far as over a single lap or a run from the road and street circuits, and he has transferred it all the way over to the ovals now, to where he can be a contender for a pole, even though he has yet to win one for the Indy 500. I think this is the year he breaks through and gets the job done.
Well, let's talk about Felix the Cat, because I can't pronounce his last name, but Felix Roosevelt. Yeah. We haven't had a lot of conversations about him, so let's get to know him.
Had a decent debut at St. Pete. Has kind of fallen off the radar a little bit, but again, I think after the struggles of Ed Jones last year, that second car is going to get a little extra special attention from Chip Ganassi this time around, and I would be very surprised if they are not part of the top 9, even though he is a rookie.
Scott Dixon, where are we at with him?
If Honda has the power, I'd say Dixon is a threat to win the pole. He won the pole in 2015. He won the pole again in 2017. It just depends on, is the Honda engine going to be strong enough to give him that chance to challenge for the pole? It wasn't last year. That's why he just barely made the top 9. If they find a little bit more from HPD, he certainly is a threat to not only qualify for the front row, but also get another pole position, certainly.
Talk about a good friend of the show. Someone has been on the show before who I followed since the Indy Lights series, and that is James Hinchcliffe, the mayor of Hinchtown. Not only is he a great driver, but he's a great personable person, and he really is. And we followed his story. He has such a great story, from coming up from the Indy Lights to almost losing his life at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to not being able to race in last year's Indianapolis 500. James Hinchcliffe deserves this. James Hinchcliffe, if anybody that we can point to says, hey, you deserve it, buddy, it's James Hinchcliffe. What are our thoughts going into May, James Hinchcliffe?
Well, one thing, I don't think he's going to DNQ this year. If you're talking about guys that are in trouble, though, with Arrow Schmidt, Meyer Shank, you got guys like Marcus Erickson, who looked a little bit out of it on Wednesday. I'd say you say the same thing about Jack Harvey. Those two guys have a fight on their shoulders, and that's part of the reason why I think that Meyer Shank did not provide a second car for, say, Catherine Lake, because they're just worried about getting Jack Harvey into the field and not trying to do a two-front war to where they not only fail to qualify one, but fail to qualify two. So Erickson looks a little bit suspect. Harvey looks a little bit suspect, but I'd say if you're talking about Hinchcliffe or Servia, who just got that right in the extra Schmidt-Pearson Aero car, I have a feeling those two guys will be safe. The other two, though, Erickson and Harvey, I have some question marks. I have currently Erickson as the fourth to last in the field, and Harvey as inside row 11s. That's all you need to know. They're certainly cutting it close.
Well, we'll see what happens. We only got just a little bit more time here because I know you got a hard stop at 9:30, and we got to get into our NFL talk. We got lots of time to talk about IndyCar in the month of May, but let's talk about our favorite Frenchman, and that's Simon Paterson. What are your thoughts?
Should make the top 9 because he's got the Penske car. The thing is, though, as he figured out this body kit, he still seemed a little bit lost with it during the open test. So if there is a guy least likely from Penske to win the race, unfortunately, I'd say the Frenchman is probably the least likely of the four to be a threat to win the Indy 500.
Matthew Embury, WSBT up in South Bend. Matthew, real quickly, give us a recap of your griditology and any more news stories that you want to bring to our attention in our closing moments of today's segment.
Well, I know my colleague David Land really thought Alonso, with the poor performance and the mechanical issues, was in trouble, but I still think I have him solidly in the field at 17. Same for Charlie Kimball at 20. Chilton had the engine failure. I still have him solidly in at 22. Award at 24, even though he didn't practice. Right now, I don't think the questions right now, I think there's a little more breathing room for Connor Daly. I moved him up from 32 all the way up to 28. But if your name is, say, James Davison, Zach Beach, Sage Karam, Connor Daly, Ferrucci, Erickson, Harvey, Jordan King, J.R. Hildebrand, Kaiser, Hanley, and you're certainly, I think, going to be sweating it out on qualifying weekend, not to necessarily make the top 9, but just to make the field. And looking ahead to the next couple of weeks, the big question in my mind is, what about this situation? It looks like we had the third engine manufacturer. The best indication right now is it's Porsche. Supposedly they're in the negotiation stages with Mark Viles. Nothing's been signed yet, but if you're looking for a favorite for that third manufacturer for 2021, Porsche, whatever you want to call it, seems to be the favorite at this moment.
All right, well, we got a bamboozle. Get on into some NFL talk. Standing by the Balanced Green Room is Cleveland Browns superfan Adam Jividan. We're going to be talking about the big quarterback shake and bake with the Colts, actually, Haskins going to the Redskins. I know you do a lot of college football and college basketball talk with us. Overall, high-level thoughts on this year's draft.
Without a doubt, the Patriots have the best draft going right now, and that's tough to say when they just dominated the NFL. But considering the players they have taken in the last couple rounds yesterday, it just seems like, once again, they are a step ahead of the rest of the pack in terms of the picks. So they've taken the running back from Alabama was a great pick. The great pick at the end of round 1 with N'Keal Harry. It just reminds me of a wide receiver, but in the mold of Ron Gronkowski. They have made great picks, and I would say if a guy like Ryan Finley drops to their pick in the 4th round, they're looking for an heir apparent to Tom Brady. They certainly could find one no worse than Ryan Finley, the quarterback from North Carolina State. So if he happens to become a Patriot, I'd say the best draft by far, even though it's odd to say it for the team that picks last in each of the rounds. The Patriots, I think, are having the best draft so far in this year's draft.
Matthew Embury, we appreciate you. We look forward to talking with you some more as we get moving into the month of May of IndyCar. Where can people find your work and masterpieces?
Again, Twitter, MATTEMBURY, and a lot to look forward to as we get closer and closer